Hello everyone, welcome to the CUBE Pod, episode 97. I'm Furrier and Vellante. We're here at Google Next. We're doing the CUBE Pod here. It's been a road show for the CUBE. We've been traveling, of course, May is going to be the big travel day. Fist pump in person. Salute. What a week. You've done so many interviews, only did like 5.
There's more to come.
Zillion.
Yeah, you're picking up the slack tomorrow.
You're going to be heading back East Coast. Google Next, a great event. We're going to get into great detail, unpack that, and essentially, looking at what they're doing in the cloud play, they're clearly rising fast. They're matching Mojo with AWS technically. We've always said Google's had great tech jobs.
Always
so that's
said
going
that.
down. Obviously the market's tanking and it's yo-yoing. Big time, the Trump tariffs.
The kangaroo market.
Impacting supply chains. Last week I did a robotics summit with Brian Bauman, the NYSE Wired community. That was 5 days, and we really touched on a lot of AI, and I didn't get tempted to dive into the weeds on the impact of the tariffs and the political drama, although the 2 days, Thursday and Friday, the stock was in the red big time. The only thing green was volume, as we joke about. Rob Hof is here with the team, Savannah's here, Paul Nashawaty from the research analyst, Frank Fay, Don Klein here at Google Next. Just we're seeing so much performance that's pushing new possibilities across all sectors. Full stack enablement is coming in. Microcode, compiler, these are words we're hearing on theCUBE all the time. So it again reinforces the narratives we've been talking about around that the action is in the AI infrastructure, will continue to be the action. At the same time, you're starting to see visibility into the agents and the role of agents. That's going to come in this year. We're going to go into Snowflake, Databricks, the events coming up. It's going to be an agent fest.
It's going to be an agent fest, no doubt.
Agent fest.
Remember last year, I think it was last year, people were talking about vector databases, Is vector database a feature or a product or a market?
So
right?
yesterday, come on.
Right, I mean, it's like, nobody even talks about vector databases anymore. Yeah. But Google, I just want to share, at the risk of being redundant from our keynote analysis, imagine, so if Google Cloud were a separate company, imagine Cisco growing at 30% a year, gaining share in so many sectors, right? That's what Google Cloud is. Now, of course, it wouldn't be possible without all the technology that Google builds and funds with search and its advertising business. But nonetheless, Google Cloud this year will be a $54 billion business. Yeah. And Google Cloud Platform, the infrastructure as a service and the platform as a service piece will be more than half of that, almost 30 billion of that. Okay, so, and of course Google gets a lot of crap from the industry about being a distant third. I mean, I've written that many, many times, but
not anymore.
It's a distant third, but Google Cloud Platform's growing at 37% a year by our estimates. They don't disclose the actual numbers, that's our estimates. And they're basically kicking ass, and they're profitable now. Yeah. They're running an operating profit of about 15% last year, which is much less than AWS's 38%, and I'm sure it's less than Microsoft's because all the software, but still it's on the right trajectory. Yeah. They're in a good position, and you can feel it with the AI mojo that they have.
Yeah, and we heard here at Google Next, Palo Alto Networks released their numbers, performance revenue numbers on Google Cloud Marketplace that Stephen Orban runs has been kicking ass there, 1.5 billion. I asked him off camera, how's the Amazon numbers? He goes, we like big numbers, so obviously bigger. Okay. So if they're doing 1.5 billion with Google, you don't got to be a ruckus. You could probably put that in ChatGPT right now, and it'll tell you what the Amazon. You get the market share numbers.
I'll give you.
You can extrapolate easily the numbers there.
I'll give you a little. Well, yeah. So
I mean, do the math right in your head.
So
if it's 1.5 with Google. Now factor in the growth.
Amazon's AWS is over 100 billion. Google Cloud Platform, like I say, this year will be about 28 billion. So Amazon will be, well over 100 billion.
Palo Alto's numbers are up in the marketplace.
I'll give you a little stat. So Palo Alto, which obviously is very aggressive, they're a product-driven company, as you know. They do a lot of M&A, but they're very engineering-oriented. They build their data platform, their stack on top of Google. They chose Google.
Yeah.
Right? And of course, there's the Wiz acquisition. Everybody's like, oh, what's going to happen there? Yeah. There's no way Google is going to sub-optimize its relationship with a customer like Palo Alto so it can sell more security with Wiz. That's ridiculous. and we'll see how that.
And you got
that
Glean chose Google as well. Well, they now are in the AWS ecosystem. Just so much. Speaking of Amazon, they debuted their Nova Sonic voice model. So Google's claim of being multimodal.
Yeah, they said they're the only hyperscale. I don't think that's true.
Well, I think Amazon launched yesterday. So maybe it was in the notes and they didn't scrub it off the keynote. So that
Yassi tweeted that.
Yeah.
So the timing was interesting.
The timing was totally on the doorstep of next. So,
but you know, the fact is, and you know, Google has said, you know, we've got the best models. We're the only hyperscaler with a true frontier model. Interesting. I think Amazon might debate that with Nova, but you know, I don't know. Is Nova considered a frontier model, a leading edge frontier model?
I don't know. Well, we'll see. I mean, look at they're racing.
I think
if you look
not
at
by the industry.
If you look at Rob Host's newsfeed rundown, he posts every week. Check out SiliconANGLE every Friday. Rob Host publishes
awesome post.
Important stories of the week, kind of summary. If you're not paying attention, calling balls and strikes with theCUBE, check out Rob Host's blog posts. It's kind of like a newsletter but he just gives you everything. But Dave, all the deals. Zuckerberg just announced the latest model on Llama 4. You got all kinds of news. Riverbed, Stitch, Amazon Q developer Atlassian, Victara, Camunda, Docker, HubSpot, ThoughtSpot, Technology. All these companies are adding more and more model support, AI-powered workflow. You have Semaphore, a company that's going to be presenting at our Agent Builder Summit, had some out there now, former Rob Bearden's company. Arena AI, tons of companies. Everyone here is infusing AI, and I was joking on theCUBE, that movie Everywhere All at Once. It's AI everywhere all at once.
That's great.
Okay, happening now in the application layer.
You know, it was funny, our last guest, Nirav, he was saying, he wakes up and he's doing mainframe modernization, he's doing AI infrastructure, he's doing, you know, the future of agentic, he's doing quantum. He's like, what decade are we in? And of course, you and I both covered the IBM Z announcement, another Z. And so people don't realize how vibrant the mainframe is. It's actually growing. I know people say, oh yeah, okay, Dave, the old mainframe, but it's true. And the mainframe has an AI stack, and it's got Linux one, and it's open, and it's open source, you know, capabilities.
OpenAI just announced a ChatGPT with a memory feature to allow you to remember all your tasks to get more personalization. Again, tons of stuff. The cybersecurity market, we heard a lot about that. New insights from theCUBE this week here about cybersecurity. All that, Dave, this week does not trump, pun intended, the NASDAQ, the market. NASDAQ closed down 4%, Meta's down 7%, Nvidia's down 6%, Amazon's down 5%, Apple's down 4%, and the White House now says Trump's tariffs on China total 145%. Okay, this is a major cat and mouse game with the government of the United States, absolutely screwing the market sideways and forwards, because,
so,
or backwards, I should say.
Right, the NASDAQ was actually up this week?
It was up yesterday and then kind of closed down, settled.
It looks like it was up.
It spiked early yesterday in the morning and then leveled down, but then today it plummeted.
But I'm just looking at the data, if it's correct, it says it's up 357 points this week. The Dow is up 3 points for the week, which is shocking given all the bounces that we've seen, and the S&P is up 14 points for the week. That's surprising given all the pain that's been going on in the marketplace.
Record-setting sessions on volume. Obviously the market doesn't know what's going on, so my take on this is clear. Trump has to walk this back. People vote in the voting booths with their vote. Everyone has a vote. He won the election. He's got a mandate, but people vote with their money. And the market has a whole nother voting dimension. So I think the market is saying, look dude, get clarity. Clean this mess up, because it's a mess. You have people freaking out right now. I have relatives that aren't even in the industry texting me, what's going on? There's a lot of fear and panic. Potentially panic could lead to bad things around the uncertainty. So the market is looking for certainty. Best that's out there, I'm saying, oh, it's going to be good. Inflation's down, oil prices are down, interest rates are going to be down. So clearly a lot of mistakes, or if there's an intentional strategy, we'll see. Now, I will tell you, the whole building in America is a good play. We covered robotics last week, which is all about the future of manufacturing in theCUBE and NYSE. It is definitely a changeover in modernization. So there is a play. That's not dogma. The manufacturing sector can be rebooted in the United States in very fast time. There's actual evidence of this. I saw Kara Swisher, oh, they can't build iPhones in the US. She's so full of it on that. She doesn't know what she's talking about because she's talking about the old way, which is not wrong on the fact that in China they have workflows, but you can be agile with robotics now. I think iPhones could be built in the United States. So I would debate her on that. The timing of that, we'll see, but TSMC's got huge commitment. Their earnings came out. They're going to be in all over Arizona. You got Texas booming with data centers. And so you can actually put a factory for the first time that has multi-purpose capabilities because software and hardware can be injected, like in the scene in the Matrix.
Well, the question is how much are those iPhones going to cost, but here's my take on this. The market very clearly wants to go up. You saw what happened yesterday when the market rocketed, when people thought Trump was going to take the tariffs off. And you also saw what happened in the bond market, and Ray Dalio's commentary is right on. I mean, you've got this huge debt, you've got to solve this problem, we're at war. And you saw the bond market actually, the bond prices rose yesterday, and I don't know what they did today, but you've got all this debt, we've got to sell bonds to finance the debt, but all these countries, particularly Japan and China, own the US debt. They don't want more. They don't want to buy more debt, so the price has to go up on the bonds to cover that. That's a bad spiral to be in. But the question I have is, what's the objective? Is the objective to bring US manufacturing back on shore, or is the objective to raise money through tariffs? Is the objective to raise money and pay down the debt because we got this problem? Is the objective ideology to make it quote unquote fair? I don't know, and it's really hard to discern what's going to happen, particularly to a lot of tech companies. You mentioned Apple. What about NVIDIA? Tariffs on Taiwan. I know there's, 65 countries now that want to negotiate. Well, I guess that's a good thing. But basically, it all comes down to US v. China. That's the war right now. And it's very unclear to me what the objectives are, what the exit strategy is, what the entry strategy is. And I think a lot of people are confused, and I think that's bad for business. Business wants to know what the rules are. Tell me what the rules are, I'll tell you how we're going to go to market and make money. And right now, it's like there are no rules. Whatever in Trump's head.
News that you're going to like, and we can talk about it and maybe pick it up next week. Andy Jassy released his 2024 letter to shareholders.
Yeah, I heard
today.
him on CNBC this morning.
And
he was great as usual.
He
doesn't know what's going to happen.
He says, quote, generative AI is going to reinvent virtually every customer experience we know and enable altogether new ones without which we fantasized about. In other words, he sees it clearly. And again, we've talked about this on theCUBE all the time, certainly with Andy, but this is an issue that I think is happening. In old waves, new technology would let the new entrant, the startup or growing startup, replace the old incumbent, old guard. New guard replace the old guard. I don't see it. It's coming out very clear in the data from theCUBE that if incumbents are agile and leverage AI, like in Amazon, they can be considered old guard if you consider them how old they are. But if you have the data and you leverage AI, you can stay in the game. So this whole computer strategy narrative of competitive strategy of how new guard replaces the old guard is shifted to old guard can be new again because you can go faster if you got access to domain-specific data, which all these old legacy companies are sitting on treasure troves of workflows and data, and if they tweak and get native AI capabilities into the system, which the VP of Engineering at Google talked about, native AI, he used that word native AI, it was also in the keynote here. Native AI means you use AI internally, not just be a consumer of some service. Of course, you could consume services, but if you don't get the native AI in your system for your own business, what they're doing with BigQuery at Google is revolutionary. That to me is a step function breakthrough that every company can do and then still use the benefit of Google's AI or Amazon's AI. So I think Jassy's right on. I think, I expect Amazon, and with the market there, my advice is hold the stocks, don't sell, let it bounce around.
Don't be selling now.
Don't be selling now. What do you call it, the falling knife, catching the falling knife?
Well, I'm not sure I'd be buying now either. But yeah, don't try to catch the falling knife is the saying. But it was interesting listening to Jassy this morning. He didn't touch tariffs in his letter, but of course Sorkin was all over him on tariffs. But I got AWS growing at 17% this year, John, doing 126 billion. And then GCP at 28 billion. Okay, so still a distant third. But the point is, reading Jassy's letter and listening to him, that's 17%. You know, notwithstanding all the tariffs and the crazy markets and the uncertainty, that 17%, if things were normal, could be understated. Yeah. Amazon could grow at more than 20% this year. I mean, if you got Azure growing at 27%, which I do, I got GCP growing at 34, 35%, I could see AWS actually accelerating growth. We've seen some signs of that because of Gen AI.
My question for Amazon, I'm going to be up there in June for 2 days of exclusive one-on-ones. We're doing a mid-year report. We're going to stream an event on June 19th in Palo Alto.
Awesome.
So if you're listening and you want to participate in that, if you're in the ecosystem, hit me up on DMs. But the question for Amazon is culture. And if you look at Google here, Google Next, Dave, Google here, and the people said this to me independently of me thinking it. This reminds me of early days AWS. They're collaborative, they're hungry, they're trying harder, and they're delivering value, and they have meat on the bone. And so Google feels a lot like AWS. AWS is the leader, and if they can keep their day one culture, and what I would ask Andy Jassy, Andy, I'll ask you right now, and I'd say it right here, my question to you would be, look at, how do you maintain the day one culture of AWS and Amazon in an era where the speed is increasing? Because remember, they're trying to fight bureaucracy. So, and he brought it up in this letter. So he's all over this. So the question is, what is the strategy? What's the mechanisms of the culture of AWS and Amazon? How do you maintain day one with the velocity of change coming? And that would be, I'd love to hear his answer. If it's keep doing what they're doing, I'm not sure that's the right answer. I'd be like, okay, what are you doing specifically to change that?
But don't you think he would go back to the leadership principles and the one-way versus two-way doors, and you know it better than I. I wanted to just bring something else up. It's sort of a tangent, but at the keynote, and we were in theCUBE, so I wasn't able to hear this. You might have heard this. Google said that they have 5x the number of customers for their data platform for BigQuery than the two other leading data platforms, and they meaning Snowflake and Databricks. And I think they're discounting AWS and Microsoft, saying they don't really have equivalent data platforms, which by the way, and they say cloud data platforms. You could argue that, remember AWS Redshift was built upon, I can't remember the company's name now, you remember the big data company they sold? It escapes me. They licensed it a one-time license, and then Amazon took an on-prem stack and built a cloud data warehouse. They sort of faked splitting compute from storage, so really Snowflake and BigQuery were the first two. But it was interesting that they put that number out there, 5x the number of customers. I asked Yasmin, would you care to comment on the revenue comparison? And she said, oh no, I would not care to comment on that. So I suspect that Snowflake perhaps has, maybe not more revenue, but probably.
Well, we're here at Google Next, they're kicking us out, so we'll cut the CUBE pod short. We're going to add in our keynote analysis of Google Next, because of course we had full team coverage here, full court press on AI everywhere all at once, great infrastructure. Tariff insanity aside, the supply chain will be impacted. We'll be watching all those tech stocks, and of course looking at the impact of the market. Thanks for listening to theCUBE pod. Of course, if you're interested in theCUBE, check out thecube.net, SiliconANGLE.com, theCUBE Research. Check out thecuberesearch.com and click on the research link. We're publishing all of our research open source, state-of-the-art research, free, fast, high-frequency insights. Check it out, of course. Check out thecubeai.com. That's our language there. If you can just do a query, do a prompt, we always try to make that better, of course. Hit us up on Twitter and LinkedIn anytime. Thanks for listening to theCUBE pod. I'm John Furrier with Dave Vellante. Thanks for listening.
Good morning, Nerd Fam, and welcome to Google Cloud Next here in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. We are here on day one, kicking off our 3 days of coverage, over 30 fantastic segments, upward of 50 guests coming for you this week. My name's Savannah Peterson, joined by the best in the business on the desk this morning. We've got Dave, we've got John, and Paul. Gentlemen, next time text me about the blue blazers.
I know, right?
Jeez.
Hey, blue's the color of the day.
Oops.
Yes, it's all right, it's all right. We'll work on that.
I hit the thrift shop, by the way.
Hey.
Expensive as hell.
So, yeah, so well, good.
I think I went into the real by mistake.
Yeah. well, we'll continue that conversation. We'll get your daughter on to talk about proper thrifting at some point. The show just kicking off here on the expo floor, however, there has been a lot of events already. I know the Analyst Day yesterday involved a Wizard of Oz immersion at the Sphere. Paul, you've had the hot takes all week, and I know you've been on the ground for a bit. What are you seeing so far to kick us off this week?
Well, I mean, it's all about the announcements. Lots of excitement going on right now. It's the show floor is crazy. 30,000+ of my closest friends are here, so it's pretty crazy. Just walking back and forth to the keynote was an adventure in itself. But AI, of course, optimized AI and platforms top of mind. We have multi-cloud, distributed cloud environments. That's also top of mind, and then interoperability. Right, that's a big factor that you're seeing at the show. That from a high level, that's really where it's really coming down to.
I think you're absolutely right. I think we're going to be having a lot of those conversations here. John, I know you were listening to the keynote, and you as well, Dave. Keen to hear, what was the announcement that stood out to you the most?
I mean, to me, the big thing was they have a whole vision around the stack of AI, and it's basically AI everywhere in all the apps, everywhere all at once kind of thing. All their apps are going to be infused with AI. I think last year we said that. AI infused everywhere, so that was the kind of like one thing that was clear. But the thing was the Ironwood TPU announcement was the big thing that showed massive investments in CapEx. This year, I think they quoted to have, I think, $45 billion this year, 7th generation TPU at Ironwood. Next gen networking opening up their global distributed network that's Google only to enterprises. That's going to be a big deal. They quoted Citadel and some other customers there that are going to get a 40% reduction in cost of ownership. And then they talked about quantum, the quantum chips. And so I found that interesting. So Jensen wasn't on stage, he did a remote appearance, but I think the infrastructure advancements this year was definitely one that they needed to do. And the rest you kind of got to fill in, squint through. There's a lot of little point examples of customers, but for the most part, they're like moving the needle inch by inch, but then the big needle mover will be the infrastructure advancements.
I think you bring up a good point there, John. I just want to highlight quantum making its way back into the conversation. We sort of had AI coming up here, then both things, then if we look at supercomputing and looking at the real high performance computing going on around the world, frankly, and now it's coming back, so I'm curious to see.
We had an interview last week, people say that you get to 1 million qubits to kind of get the chip, and so you start to see fabs, chips being built with quantum, major milestone in the industry, still not there at full 1 million qubits, but still significant.
There's a lot of progress. Don't sleep on quantum is all I'm saying. I love to hear it. Dave, what about you?
Yeah, let me set the context if I can. I mean, we all know where Google gets its money. It gets its money from search and ads, but Google, this year, our estimates are from the CUBE research that Google will do $54 billion in its overall cloud. And GCP, Google Cloud Platform.
That's significant.
Will be, yeah, it is, and it'll be about 28% of that. And for the first time last year, Google started to make a profit. It was small, but this year, they're making around 15 to 20% operating margins. Now that compares to AWS at mid-30s, even high 30s. Amazon doesn't, Azure doesn't report its operating margins, but I'm sure they're right up there. But the point is, for the first time ever now, by the way, Google overall cloud's growing at 30%. Google Cloud Platform,
clip right there. Yep.
Yes, Google Cloud Platform is growing significantly faster. So for the first time, Google Cloud Platform will cross over 50% of Google's overall cloud. Okay, so they're starting to make money. Where do you, and the reason I bring this up is because Google gets a lot of grief, right, for being number 3. How many $54 billion businesses are out there? You're talking about a company that's the size, a business unit that's the size of Cisco, right? That's now starting to turn a profit, and they're spending, what, $75 billion this year on CapEx? So they're participating in, if you take the big 3, about a $240 billion market. And it's rare, right? It used to be, tech used to be a winner takes all or most market. Now this is an example where the lead AWS and the other lead Azure, they're doing great, and Google, number 3, is also doing great. And the last thing I'll say is AI has been a big tailwind for their business. If you go back to 2023 and look at Google's AI business, just from the ETR surveys, as a percent of AWS, it was around 70%. You fast forward to January 2025, it's up over 90%, and that has boosted Google's AI, and like you said, John, they got the full stack. Jensen even said it. They have the best full stack for AI of anybody in the business.
Remember 2 years ago when we were here, Savannah, you remember we said Google's next is a dark horse. We highlighted some of the critical analysis. Their operational scale up was challenging because Furrier was getting his sea legs, and they were kind of nipping at the heels and just eating the dust off AWS on the growth. But now you got Sundar Pichai on stage, which is a big notable thing. Forgot to mention that earlier, because what Google's doing is saying, no, we're flexing. So Google is seriously flexing. Sundar comes in, gives the whole Google vision, we're at scale, opening up to the enterprise, the networking. You start to see Google saying, hey, we're going to flex on our power. We always loved the nerd side of Google, but now they got the blocking and tackling done. They got the ecosystem, they got the marketplace under Steve Orban growing. You start to see those third-party ISVs on Google now. App Dev is in the keynote. Yeah. GKE was mentioned in the keynote. I've never seen Google mention Kubernetes to the level of prominence.
And Vertex.
Oh, without a doubt.
That was huge. So again, these are the things they had to do.
Yeah.
When we were saying, and they're not a dark horse anymore, they're right there. And you see the adoption with AI, Dave, I agree. The product is going to be good.
Yeah, I want to jump in on what both of you are talking about here. And I think the big area of growth for Google right now is we're seeing in our own research that 94% of organizations are using 2 or more clouds. 65% are using 4 or more clouds. They have to adopt the multi-cloud, the hybrid cloud approach. GKE is the way to do this, right? To harmonize this across the platforms, make sure that's working. We're also seeing in our research that 20% of respondents indicate that application portability is critical for their organization. 67% say it's very important for them, right? And if they're doing this across multiple clouds, that's how they're going to grow. That's why I think in the last few years, you've seen this significant uptick in Google. I really hate to see that Google is like number 3 because it's always kind of the laggard to the hyperscalers in the US market, but it's definitely growing and it has that capabilities.
A lot of companies would take that position, I think.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Well, yeah, but I think what's kind of interesting though is it puts them in a unique opportunity where they can really focus on the ecosystem side of this. It's not just about, the data coming from AI is only going to scale infinitely really over the next 5 to 10 years. So who is winning now, to your point, and I love the data you were sharing earlier, Dave, great context setting, is yeah, okay, so there was these winners in the first cloud run that we had, so to speak, but what's going to happen next is going to involve not only hybrid cloud, there's going to be a lot on-prem, and the reality is these full stacks, these ecosystem partners, we talk about it with Dell as well, it's going to be whoever wins that whole piece of the pie, not just the segments of it in terms of solutions, that's going to win in this overall game.
I mean, I think the ecosystem point, Savannah, is right on, because if you're a full stack, you got to do a lot of things I call in between the toes, the details that no one sees. At GTC, we saw a couple big trends. We talked to Equinix, they have basically the footprint for kind of like the on-prem and edge. But at GTC, it was things like MV Cache, that was very buried, but very key instruments around controlling the clusters. Here at Google, you heard things like Cluster Director, Anywhere Cache, hyperdisks, exapools, and then the pathways. You mentioned GK Inference Gateway, Pathways, which is distributed ML pipelining, powering Gemini. They're opening that up for multi-host inferencing. So at GTC, it was all about inferencing, power, and then ecosystem development. So I think if you're a full stack, you have to have ecosystem proof points, number 1, and 2, you got to do the hard shit that's in the systems. That's a huge deal, and they're doing it.
It doesn't matter if the developers don't use it. And I think a lot of this is going to come back to the developer experience, which is what I suspect you might have been ready to talk about.
Of course the developers are going to use it, right? That's how it's basically being laid out. Firebase Studio was another one that came up, right? So the thing that I found very interesting, again, I'm going to go back, because as an analyst, I go back to my research, right?
And we love that about you, Paul.
About a year ago, I ran a survey. We found that 18% of production applications are using AI, right? Reran that survey 9 months later. That number jumped to 54%, and I guarantee you that number is much higher today, right? For all production-based applications. When you look at what Google announced with Firebase Studios and the ability to have that development effort eased across these different platforms, using AI in the platform, that's going to be a differentiator, right? Because that's going to accelerate development and allow for that ease of use. When we talk about modernization efforts with CIOs, we see that the 2 barriers of entry for modernization is complexity and skill gap issues. That's what I was hearing in the keynote today, how to address complexity and skill gap issues, and that's where I think that Google is going to excel.
And don't forget, they have the eye candy too. They have the VEO2, and at the end he quoted, said, we are the only cloud that has all Gen AI in all modalities, which I thought was interesting. Like, I didn't check that because Amazon just made an announcement yesterday on the heels of this event, but again, back to the Google kind of doing the work. They're chopping the wood, they're carrying the water, while scaling up the infrastructure, and again, the proof's going to be in Vertex and some of the cool consumer and enterprise stuff, and they actually intentionally said that. I don't know if you caught that. It's like, we're targeting the consumer and the enterprise.
Well, it's important because consumer is what drives volume, and it what drives adoption, and it lowers cost, and then it bleeds into the enterprise. We've seen that over and over and over again, but there's two other things that stood out to me. One was they really aggressively recognized that not all AI is going to be done in the cloud. And they talked about NVIDIA, Dell got a small mention, and so they talked about sovereign AI and bringing the cloud, the AI, to the data on-prem, which I think recognizes that there is data gravity. There's a lot of data that's not going to go into the cloud. So that's a potential vector of opportunity. The second thing that I was notable by omission, I didn't hear anything, or very little, about security. Mandiant.
Interesting.
And the Wiz acquisition, now of course they probably can't talk too much about Wiz, but security is another big play for them. Now I wonder, is it because they don't want to tick off some of their partners like Palo Alto Networks, who uses BigQuery for their AI security knowledge graph, so they didn't really get into security. Google has great security. And of course Amazon always starts with security, so I was surprised that they didn't play that up.
Show. They buried it with compliance, sovereignty, that one kind of soundbite. They kind of just buried it in one bucket.
And the Gemini agents as well, right? They talked about security in the Gemini agents as well. So there was a piece of it. I do want to come back to data sovereignty. What we're finding in cloud native research, right? We're finding that today, cloud native development is happening on-prem at 11% of respondents are saying this, right? But we asked them about the next 2 years where that development is happening, and 33% of organizations are going to do cloud native development on-prem. Right? That means they're repatriating back from the public cloud and bringing it back on-prem to do that. So this is a wise move for Google to think about where the development is happening.
Or they're bringing maybe it's not repatriation, maybe they're doing the development in the cloud, but they're bringing the AI to the data that's going to live on-prem. They're not going to move that data. See, I think the repatriation narrative is going to flip and turn to bring AI to the data. I think it's a more viable approach. Yeah, there's repatriation going on. Maybe 15% of the workloads are getting repatriated, but it's not big enough to offset the growth of the cloud. But I just want to make one more point. The skill set point is critical. If they don't have those skill sets on-prem, they're going to go to the cloud.
Yeah. Dave, remember the Jensen's analyst talk we discussed? He said, still most of the training and inference is done in the cloud.
Sure.
That's why they're pumping the on-prem, that's where the growth is. They have AI factories, Dell jumped on AI factories. So the question to you is, did you hear AI factory in the keynote today? I mean, I heard a little bit of it. Amin Vadat talked about the Ironwood. And it's interesting, they call it the AI hypercomputer. But he said this is something that we've been talking about on theCUBE. He said, the chips are only one piece of the overall infrastructure, which acts as a system, the AI hypercomputing platform. That's basically their AI factory. I mean, they're basically not saying that word, but
and the
it's a direct overlay for NVIDIA, but yet they said, oh, we got Blackwell and Vera Rubin coming. So clearly AWS and Google Cloud are leveraging NVIDIA and doing their own chips and leveraging their own resources. So the question will be, we'll watch, will the cloud get most of that bulk load on market share for the inference? It's going to be very interesting to see if the AI factory or this on-prem motion continues to happen. If they don't get software running on it.
Well, I think that's where that's a part of the ecosystem, in my opinion, is being able to do both.
So just to give you a sense, Furrier just quantified this in our research, and in 2025, the data center market just for AI, the AI workloads were 252 billion. On-prem was like 15, this is 2025, 252 billion. On-prem will be 15 billion of that too. So it's a vast majority in the cloud. And the on-prem really doesn't kick up, really doesn't break 100 billion, which is still a big number, until the end of the decade.
I mean, are we in POC purgatory still? I mean, when do we break out of POC purgatory?
Because of the skills.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point on, Savannah, on interoperability, the agent-to-agent announcement from Google Cloud today, that was something that it kind of dovetails nicely into what you were talking about, the agent builder factory, right? And how they're interoperating these things together, right? Having these applications talk to each other. This goes, Dave, to your point about security, right? You got to think of IAM and MIM, right? And is that a way of the past, right? Is it these agents, the agent-to-agent approaches that are going to take over that security protocol?
Nir Zook told me a week and a half ago, that everything we know about security has changed because of AI. He said, we used to be able to stop 99% of the attacks, and that 1% humans could deal with, but because of generative AI, it's impossible now. The adversaries can scale their phishing attacks
totally.
so much. That 1% overwhelms the humans, so it has to, the only way to defend it is with AI. So everything has to be rethought.
If you're Palo Alto, Google's got now the Google WAN, Cloud WAN they call it, it's their network that they're offering to enterprises. Google's security is damn good. If you look at their security, they got billions and billions of users. And so I would see a security reset. So I think security wasn't messaged mainly because they didn't want to take away from the show.
And they also have a security show. I mean, so I think there's
Mandiant, right?
Yeah, I mean.
Well, they kind of collapsed it.
Didn't they bring it in?
No, they collapsed it into
So it's here, right?
Mandiant
so
didn't
that's why.
this
Now
year.
maybe it's
Oh.
day. Maybe it's day 2.
Remember Sunil Patti?
Mandiant
Sunil
showed
Patti ran security.
I did not
He's
know
no
that.
longer with Google. Kevin Mandiant had left, and so that's a big void in the market. So maybe they didn't have their.
Because it was in October last year. Anyway,
and don't forget, this is only day 1.
Right, I know.
Right, could be day 2. Right,
there's a lot coming.
And
the rest
maybe
of
that's
the-
where they're going to focus on posture management and the whole threat intelligence, which Mandiant brings.
Absolutely good. One thing's clear from this conversation, we are going to have a lot to talk about all week with all of our fantastic guests. Dave, John, and Paul, no one else I'd rather do it with. Very grateful to share the week with you both and with all of our awesome guests. And thankful to all of you for tuning in wherever you might be. We're here in Las Vegas, Nevada at Google Cloud Next, day 1. My name's Savannah Peterson. You're watching theCUBE, the leading source for enterprise tech news.